How's it going, guys? Okay, so for this video I'm going to do a really quick one on low end and fixing low end problems, because I know a lot of people overthink the low end and they struggle to correct problems in the lows, so like the kicks, basses, subs, whatever you're using. But it really does come down to just a combination of a few things, and it's EQ, dynamic compression, and your monitors. Now, your monitors, your headphones, or your speakers, whatever you're using, probably the most important aspect of it. Otherwise, you're just mixing blind. So what I'll do is I'll just open up the plugins that I use. Basically, I always stick to the FabFilter stuff. Like, I just love FabFilter plugins, especially the EQ Q3 with the dynamic compression within the EQ. And now and again, I use the Pro MB, the Pro Multiband as well, just because I'm used to it. So these are the I suppose the first aid frequency bits that I always do on my low end. This is actually EQ and compression on the low end group. So I always group my kicks, my basses all together. Anything that's sub 300 hertz, I would say I put into a group. So in this case, I've got kick and a few basses. Let me just play it for you. So yeah, you get the idea. It's really sort of round, nice, deep, low end. You know, you can crank it really loud and it won't, you know, flap and like womp your speakers. And that frequency for me, I always find is usually around about 65 hertz. So I add this onto my kick a lot and my bass, and it's an EQ. I've not added it on this one. So the kick EQ is 74 hertz, quite a big steep drop off there, so like 9 dB, but that isn't a one, you know, change fits all, because it's the kick is really the problem. But I've used this kick in all my tracks and it works well. I just need to treat that little section and it's fine. This is all just to stop the sort of knockiness in the kick. So the kick's got some like sort of mid taps and things which I don't like, so I'm kind of taming those. But that wompy sound that you sometimes get in your speakers, that's usually around 65 hertz. In this case, you know, I've used 63 and I've just ducked it a little bit. So that's an area to watch out for. 65 hertz, take it down 4 dBs potentially in your low end group, and that'll add like a nice bit of warmth, because what that's doing is it's pulling out that really kind of, it's kind of in between the sub and anything that's got like tightness and character. So I just take it down a little bit and it sort of treats everything nicely. This section here is a frequency around 120. I always add some kind of dynamic EQ to this section, and I have it just ducking it down every time the frequency is getting to that level. And this section is again just like not a very nice sounding frequency spectrum. It adds like a kind of woodiness to the low end, and I like to pull that out, and it just makes it a lot warmer and subbier. So I'll show you what I mean. then that area there, which you can see, is it's doing the same thing as what I mentioned about 65 hertz. It's just a little bit of a wompy area, and it's taking away some of the tightness from the low end. So I've done the same thing. I've added a dynamic band there, and that's just ducking at that frequency. I'll just solo it so you can hear it. So it's just really adding some warmth to the bass. That's the kick. Get rid of that. And what I like to do is as well on the first part of the chain of effects, I like to add in a multiband, and I just sort of leave it as it is, already kind of set up. So I'll just put a fresh one in and show you what I mean. So what I tend to do is I'll literally just click there, done, click there, bring that in, and then I leave it, and that's kind of adding like an automatic ducking on the subs, and then that kind of wompy area. It just tightens everything up a little bit, because you don't want too much subs to come through. You want it to be a little bit of a slope from a lot of the deep stuff up towards the low mids, but then it's nice to take out some of those low mids as well, just to kind of warm the sound up a little bit. So I'll show you what it sounds like with and without. This is going to be very subtle. This is something I add on the low group purely so that you can really drive the volume, and then you can, if you heard them tracks that you can turn up your speakers really loud and it comes through so clear, and the low end's really good, it doesn't distort the speakers, or like I say, flap the tweeters. That's just taming that stuff so I can really drive the volume a little bit louder. That's about it really, aside from the obvious stuff like side chaining. It's important to side chain your bass to your kick. You want to make sure your kick's always coming through consistently all the time. So I use the compressor from Ableton, and then I just route it to the kick, and then just turn the threshold down a little bit. That sorts that out nicely. And then, if there's any other EQ stuff you want to do, like I've added a filter on the bass because I don't want any of the mids coming through on the bass. I want it to be more of a subby bass. So that's the only reason for that. But really, yeah, that's the main things I do in my low end. Sometimes I'll add a compression onto the very end of everything if I feel like it could just be tightened a touch. And what I like to use is the Renaissance Axe. So this is it's just a dead simple compressor. It's very powerful. I mentioned it a few times. I don't actually mess with the threshold because it does quite a big job. I'll turn it on and off and show you what I mean. So yeah, basically that's going to be very subtle. You might not be able to hear it. Again, that's a similar thing for the volume. I like to, what the Renaissance Axe tends to do is if the low end's just still a little bit sloppy, and it just needs a little bit tightening, the transient's tightening a little bit, and the kick and the bass just gelling together just a touch. Renaissance Axe does a really good job of just kind of bringing all that together. You don't need to mess with the threshold. But that's it. That's literally what I have on almost all my projects now, and it, I find it does a good job of just making sure your bass is nice and sorted. So, just to a recap, 60 to 70 hertz is not a very nice sort of wompy area of subs. I like to take that down like 4 dB. 120 hertz is an area of like low mids that's doesn't really bring much, and it adds like a woodiness to the low end. I like to bring that down, and it kind of softens everything. And then I just add a multiband on the very low, so like 30 hertz and lower, which is basically inaudible, but it does bring in signal into your master. So I like to tame that, and also loud volumes, taming them very lows is going to be important to protect the speakers and the overall clarity of the mix. So yeah, that's it. Give us a shout if you got any questions in the members area, and yeah, speak to you all soon. Ciao.